Hey traders, Akil here. Welcome back to another episode of the Trading Coach Podcast. Thank you as always for joining me. In today's episode, we're going to talk a little bit about trading psychology and not just the mistakes that we make as traders. I know we've heard those stories over and over again, but a deeper look at the reason behind or the reason why we make those mistakes. And it's a pretty interesting look at things from a well-known trading psychiatrist called Denise Scholl. Now, it's funny, psychology is something that I've always tried to stay away from and avoid in my life. Me and my mother, we don't have the best relationship. She was a psych professor, so I've always avoided those subjects because I didn't want to end up like her. And lo and behold, now I am kind of just like her. I am a teacher. I am a teacher of a subject that is very heavily leaning on psychology. And she was a business consultant. I am also a business consultant of sort as well. So it's funny how you kind of get dragged right back into those things anyway. But let's take a deeper look at trading psychology. Hopefully this gives you some insight into why you're making those mistakes. Hopefully knowing why you're making these mistakes will help you deal with these mistakes. And I even share a pretty funny story about, an incident I had when I was little that I recall on now to help me deal with my psychological mistakes in the market. So it's funny when you become a trader, you learn a lot about yourself, and when you can learn not just what you're doing but the reasons behind why you're doing it, it makes your life a lot easier. Are any of you guys familiar with the lady named Denise Scholl? Trading psychology, yeah. So she's above my pay grade, obviously, but she goes into a lot of stuff even deeper about. Really, okay, so we know that we're traders, we know that we make mistakes, we know that we have emotions, but the key is figuring out why we're making mistakes. And she takes it deeper all the way back to like your childhood. And how did you feel during certain periods of your childhood? Like when you were punished, when you did something good, when you did something bad, what were those feelings like? And really, if you can understand those type of feelings, because that's, in a way, when we go to the market, we basically duplicate things from our past, right? So if we can understand why we feel a certain way in certain situations going all the way back to when we were kids, we can kind of understand it more now as adults and manage it, right? So, a good example would be like, say as a kid, you're the type of person when you get in trouble, instead of like being, yeah, sorry, mom, I did it. You're the one that fights back. And you're like, I'm going to create every excuse not to lose this battle, right? Any of you guys like that? You got in trouble and you know you're in trouble and you just keep making up excuses and you don't admit it. No, do this, do that, do that, do that. Well, the same thing's going to happen in the markets, right? When you take a trade that you're not supposed to take and a certain trading coach calls you out and says, hey, were you supposed to take that trade? Because I remember talking to you the week before, and you said that your rules were to wait for a higher high, higher close. Well, instead of being like, yeah, Akil, you're right, my bad, bad trade, I'll exit right away. What do you think that trader's going to do? They're going to be stubborn, right? They're going to fight against you. They're going to create excuses and stay with it. Now, you take that scenario and maybe it's not them talking to a trading coach, but them just being in a trade themselves. And typically when people break rules, you don't break rules by accident. I do make mistakes. Sometimes I break rules by accident as a trading coach, and it's more so like focus-based stuff. Like I'll draw a fib in from the wrong mark and think it's a 1618 when it's really not, because I missed the wick because I was working too fast. I'm like, that's actually not a 618. My bad. I make mistakes like that. And that's okay. Obviously, you don't want to make it a habit, but it's okay. It's human nature to make small mistakes. But very rarely do you make a mistake where you're blatantly wrong and deep down you don't know that you're blatantly wrong. right? You pretty much know or don't know what type of trade you should be in. Am I correct in saying that? I mean, if you're not a double top trader and you take a double top, I mean, come on, you can't be like, oh, oops, you know you did bad, right? So imagine that trader in that same scenario where they know they did something wrong for whatever emotional reason, and now they're involved in a bad trade, and they have two choices, right? One is exit immediately. That's what they should do. Admit that, hey, I'm wrong, my bad, I goofed up, I got emotional. Let me just cut my losses, or just cut losses or wins, doesn't matter. Let me get out of the trade. But the trader that is stubborn, the trader that wants to fight instead of admit that they're wrong, right? They're going to stay in that trade. The trade's going to go against them, and what do you think they're going to do? When that ticker is getting red and red and red and going back towards their stop loss, right? A stop loss, having your stop loss hit is basically another way of admitting you're wrong, right? Am I right? Having your stop loss hit, your stop loss should be at a level where you say, okay, my analysis is wrong. So having your stop loss hit is basically a humbling experience that says, hey, market, you know what? I was wrong. Bravo, hats off. But if you're unable to do that, right, you're going to start moving that stop loss back because you're going to go into fight or flight mode, right? And you're fighting with every inch of your being to not be proven wrong or to not admit that you're wrong. And until you're stopped out, you're not wrong. The market will come back. If I just move my stop loss past the next structure level, the market will hold there and come back, right? What you're doing, people aren't doing that because they're necessarily afraid of losing money. I'm sure that's part of it, but I think a lot of it is ego. They don't want to be proven wrong. They don't want to admit that they're wrong. And before you know it, just like a little kid, right? If your mom calls you out on something and you admit it, say, Mom, you had cheated on the test, I shouldn't have done that, you probably get punished a little bit, right? Slap on the wrist, slap on the hind parts, right? But if you fight mama, right? Never fight mama. Oh, I learned that lesson the hard way. That's how I learned I was an athlete. My mom chased me down the block and they caught me. That's when I knew I had some fast genes in me. They called her ostrich leg. She's from Jamaica. They used to bet, her brothers used to bet on her. She's a small little twig of a woman. And back on the island, right, you get money however you can. So they used to find these guys at the track and be like, hey, I bet my little sister can beat you. And she's like 90 pounds dripping wet. And they'd be like, oh yeah, okay, whatever, I'll take that bet. And then boom, she whooped her behind. And one time I did something wrong and she chased me down the block. I was trying to get to the school bus. I was so close. She got me, grabbed me in the backpack, pulled me in and whooped my behind. Right in front of the bus. Anyway, if you do something like that, if you run away from your consequences like I did, right, the punishment is typically worse. And same thing like moving your stop loss back. You move your stop loss back where, well, would have been a 15 pip stop you took. Now it's a 50 pip stop. You just made your situation worse for no reason. For no reason. So it really does. If you ever get a chance to read her book, I haven't read it yet. I really want to focus on it. That's why I'll probably read it on my way over to London or whatever. But if you're getting a chance to read her book or hear any presentations for her, it's really deep, like real psychology, mommy issues, going back to this and that. It's interesting though. And I truly think as a trader, the more you understand about yourself, the more you kind of can control yourself in the market.